Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Good evening, and welcome to our Talk Sports program. It is our weekend program, Saturday Sports Special, where we speak with the movers and shakers in sports, the sportsmen, sportswomen, sports administrators, coaches, just about everyone involved in sports. Well, this weekend, we're speaking with a special guest. Well, no stranger to the program. He has been around a couple of times on our program. And in his capacity as president of the Caribbean Association of Olympic Committees, we welcome Mr. Keith Joseph, who will be speaking. Well, I can't say Mr. Keith Joseph of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, okay? Because, there are folks in Grenada that will say, hey, Keith Joseph, Grenada. There are folks in Trinidad that will say, Keith Joseph, Trinidad. And there might be folks other places, but he will tell us. But, there's always someone who's trying to grab Mr. Joseph, and, when I said that Mr. Joseph will be on the program, I remember someone said to me and tell me, just remember he's Grenadian, okay? And I say, boy, that could be a problem because, St. Vincent can say, Trinidad can say, and others can say. But we welcome in Mr. Keith Joseph back to our program. We're speaking a couple of things within the hour. We want to talk about the Olympic torch relay, historic in the Caribbean. It's, as you know, France, Paris, in fact, will be hosting the Summer Olympic Games, and by extension, they had the torch relay in the French Dom, which is very historic for the Caribbean. Mr. Joseph was in the French Dom, Martinique, I think, Martinique in particular, with Guadeloupe and Martinique, but he was in Martinique for that. We also talking about the upcoming General Assembly, the Gala Awards, the annual Gala Awards, and of course the second Caribbean Games. The second Caribbean Games. Remember, the first Caribbean Games was actually held in the French Doms, okay? So we'll be talking about that. And also my co-host, Rudian Sylvan in Toronto, will also join us. But let me welcome Mr. Keith Joseph and say good morning to you, Mr. Joseph.
Good morning, my friend.
Yes, and it's nice having you on the program, and it's a pleasure. As I said, within that hour, we want to speak about so many things, of course. But just for clarity, Mr. Joseph, as I started off, you're a Caribbean man, I think you will say.
I take it that. I take whatever you say. Back a long way, and I think we both knew each other and how much we have both attempted to use sport as a vehicle for bringing our Caribbean together.
Right, that's the important thing, especially in the Caribbean, how important it is. So, Mr. Joseph, let's kick it off with the torch relay, important segment of the Olympic Games, as we know. There is torch relay, and you had the experience of witnessing the torch relay in the French Dom in Martinique. Well, it was in Guadeloupe and Martinique, but you had the Martinique leg of it. Just relate to us what took place in Martinique.
Well, the thing is that the torch was actually taken to the three major areas, three major territories. French Guyana, which some of us call Cayenne, to Guadeloupe, and then to Martinique. And we thought it was an historic occasion from many fronts. One, it is that, the French Olympic Committee has, over the years, and perhaps prompted by the relationship that these three countries have with CANOC, allow them in their own countries to carry the term Olympic in their respective organizations. So in Guadeloupe, it's the Guadeloupe Olympic and Sports Association. French Guyana has a similar thing. And Martinique, it is CITOSMA, which is the Martinican equivalent of Olympic and Sports Association. So it is, again, that backdrop and the engagement with CANOC and so on, that they were interested in being part of the torch relay. And that is important for us in CANOC because, as you know, if you're not an NOC, because we are an association of NOCs, you're an associate member. And historically, since being officially established in 2003 in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, we've always had the Caribbean equivalent of territories: Anguilla, Montserrat, Turks and Caicos. Um, and we've had the French, and we've also had the Dutch, because as you know, during the period that we have been in existence, there was a Netherlands Antilles Olympic Committee before the people of those of the Netherlands decided that they wanted a referendum, and they went back under the monarchy. So they are back under the original Netherlands, right? As we know it. So they are now also an associate member, because they cannot be a full member not being an NOC. So we've always had these associate members. But one of our founders, Steve Stout, always said that, look, these are Caribbean peoples. If we're an organization from the Caribbean, then it is important that we have our Caribbean people included rather than excluded. So we've always sought to be inclusive. And it's just by the luck of the draw that our first Caribbean Games was held in Guadeloupe. And the first opportunity that all of us had to be involved in the torch relay has come from Martinique, two of our associate members. And that is instructive. So we needed to be part of this historic occasion. And Martinique, CITOSMA, which is their sport and Olympic association, they invited us because they initially had a larger concept. They thought it was sufficiently historic. They wanted at one point to invite the Minister of Sports. They wanted to invite all of the national Olympic committees of the region, etc. Unfortunately, financing didn't allow that to happen, so they accepted the fact that the executive of CANOC would come, and we would essentially pay our way.
Okay, so in essence, then that it's important to recognize the continued efforts of the French Dom in the sporting landscape of the Caribbean, because as you mentioned, the first Caribbean Games, for example, was held in one of the French Doms, and now we have this, and it appears that they always try to incorporate the rest of the Caribbean. And even when there are many challenges, as we understand with the first Caribbean Games, they came in. And I know your involvement in moving, between the islands and things like that. So to get them, not just on board, but to get them in line with what is expected, and things like that. So I think it's an important point you have been raising, how they have been important in the sporting landscape of the Caribbean.
Michael, the thing is, look, we talk Caribbean and we talk Caribbean unity all the time, but we behave as though the Caribbean is just English-speaking people.
English, yeah.
We have English, French, Dutch, and Spanish.
And Spanish, yeah.
Exactly. So the fact that the French have taken the initiative in this regard is important for us, and it shows the merit and the enhanced status of CANOC that we can bring this to happen. The intention of them hosting the torch was not just for the French, because you know that these three territories are very strong advocates of the fact that they are Caribbean, that they have produced Caribbean athletes who have made Olympic teams for France, who have won medals, who have been on football teams for France, etc., etc. They're very proud of what they have been able to do, and they have never lost sight of the fact that they are from the Caribbean. And so they wanted this to be an opportunity of bringing the Caribbean together, which is why they had this broader concept of inviting ministers of sports and other NOCs, because they wanted it to be a Caribbean experience. They didn't just want the torch to come because it was all about France. It was all about Caribbean peoples coming together through sport to facilitate solidarity and to showcase that whatever about the water that divides us as islands, we are nonetheless imbued by a particular historical experience, and that we've been able, as Caribbean people, resident in the Caribbean, to work through sport to facilitate collaborations, cooperation, etc., etc. So that was the gist of it. So the torch relay was the reflection and the representation of that concept. And then the other activities that we had while we were there added to that, and we can discuss that as we go along.
Yes, certainly. So it brings in mind now the preparation mode of the Caribbean and CANOC by extension for the Olympic Games in Paris. And I know CANOC, even with the last Olympic Games, with the camps and all these sort of things. Let's talk about the preparations of the Caribbean NOCs for the Paris Olympic Games.
Look, the Caribbean NOCs are engaged in the preparation exercise, but remember that the Olympic Games are in fact made up of individual sports. So international federations are each responsible for the requirements for their individual sports. We are big in track and field. We're fairly comfortable in swimming. We're doing well in cycling. And of course, Bermuda showed us that they have the triathlon athletes well prepared. Dominican Republic, some in judo and the martial arts. Let me tell you, the fact is that NOCs are just the coordinating body. So each of the national federations are informed as soon as the NOCs get the information as to the requirements from the respective international governing bodies of what they have put before the IOC and which have been accepted as the standards for their participation in the event. So that's the way the system works. So NOCs, while they're carrying a national team, and that has its own history as to how the IOC insists that the team belongs to the NOC. It's a National Olympic Committee team that is coming. Each of the sports that constitute the program of the Olympic Games, their international federation liaises with their national association and informs them of the requirements, the standards, the time frame within which they must select, etc. So within the region, what has been happening is that the appointed chief of mission of each of our NOCs would be advising all of the national associations whose sports are on the program of all of the information as they come to hand. And then you work with those national associations who then work with their clubs, their athletes, etc., to try to make the requisite standard and to provide the required information that the IOC and the organizing committee of the games need in order to facilitate accreditation, long list, and all those kinds of things. So in the case of athletics, for example, you communicate with all of your clubs, to get a sense of where your athletes are, their coaches, what the coaches are telling you, or the plans that they are preparing to try to get the athletes to make the standards, right? And as you look around, you realize, look at the situation Jamaica is in. It now requires its own national championships to have more than 3 international organizations in order to make a last-ditch effort to get onto the 4x400 meter men's relay team, right? Because the dynamics have changed. World Relays, World Athletics says the World Relays was a qualifying bar. And those teams that didn't make it then have to find access to competition that would allow them to make it. That happens with every sport. Some sports have done their qualification system differently, and they have already been selected. Others, the deadline is the 30th of June, morning of the 31st or the night of the 30th, they have to send in their information to the NOCs so that it gets to the organizing committee and the IOC in time to meet that deadline. So the preparations have been, it's not the NOC that does the preparation per se, but it becomes a facilitator of all of the national federations of sports that are on the Olympic program to remind them of all of the deadlines, send them the whole schedule, because each sport has a manual that has been prepared by its international federation approved by the International Olympic Committee, which is sent to the NOC, and the NOC sends that out and then receives information. There's a back and forth between the National Federation and the National Olympic Committee as to where any of these athletes or teams or whoever that have a chance of making the standards, getting the information and getting to competitions that will allow them the opportunity to qualify. In the case of the Caribbean, everybody has been doing what is required. And so you've seen some sports, swimming, for example, many of the teams that did not, Caribbean teams that do not have highly competitive people, they would have already identified the male and female universality place that they would have taken on board. As we realize, the US swimming, European swimming, USA track and field, their trials are currently taking place because they have so many people who are likely to make the standards anyway. And that they, at the end of their championships, they then put in place, because in both cases, swimming and athletics in the US, they mirror the exact program of the Olympic Games. And to say that is to say, athletics is going to be 13 days, right? So they have the events as they are, or the program. The same amount of time between events is allowed for each of the athletes, etc., so that you know, if you want to do multiple events, then you know what is happening, the rest period between each, etc., And when they finish, you're on the team. The USA says, for example, hey, in athletics, the first 3, that's it. After the trials, they give you your kit because you're on the Olympic team. The first 6 in the 100 meters are the 4x1 team with 2 reserves. And the same thing for the 4x4. So different countries have different approaches to how they organize their trials, what events they're going to be using for their trials, etc. So the preparations have been going, and you've seen on a daily basis different countries, different NOCs indicating who from their respective countries would have made the standards.
Certainly some level of clarity there, because I know a lot of people sort of, well, they're more concerned about who's representing the country, but they don't know the process of the selection and all of that. One other thing I want you to just talk about before we go into some other details, CANOC has been very supportive of cricket in the Olympic Games, and we know the World Cup is taking place in the region now. Talk to us about CANA's role, because I know probably a year or 2 years, 2 years ago, CANOC has been putting out things about being supportive of cricket for LA 28. I think that was the case. Let us talk about CANOC's position regarding cricket for the Olympic Games.
Look, CANOC, cricket, it was not our making, but we were able to excel at it. And so we wanted to see the sport go forward. I mean, before cricket, we were trying with netball. Unfortunately, that has not earned the kind of attention and appeal that cricket has. And I dare say that cricket's appeal has come from a combination of things, because one is the introduction of the IPL and the way that has changed the game of cricket. And secondly, the Commonwealth Games Federation, because, in 1998, when the Commonwealth Games were held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, cricket was on the program. And it returned to the program in Birmingham in 2022. So the fact of the matter is that there has been some interest in cricket, but the IOC, if you notice, we have dance that's going to be on the program. We have rock climbing that has gotten on the program. No sport is sacrosanct these days in terms of the chances of getting onto or staying onto the Olympic Games program.
Mr. Joseph, even esports.
Exactly, right? But they have organized a separate esports Olympics just to not yet bring it into the realm of the bona fide game. So the fact of the matter is that new sports are emerging. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, and Sylvan can tell you that if next thing we hear paddle is on the next program, because they're looking at programs that are attractive, have mass appeal, and which will bring in the dollars that they use for for helping other associations, Olympic committees around the world, and so on generally. But of course, the issue you have now is that the athletes are saying, we are bringing that value and you're not giving us much of it. But that's another story. So the fact of the matter is that we supported cricket from the very beginning. We supported Cricket West Indies. We actually sent a letter to the IOC in support of the International Cricket Council's arrangement and their desire to be part of the thing. Since that time, we have been intimately involved in our relationship with the International Cricket Council and Cricket West Indies in particular. So what we've been doing, we've been saying that the process for Pan Am Games, for example, and Central American and Caribbean Games, is that the program for those games must be the program of the Olympic Games coming, the next edition of the Olympic Games. And so it means that Pan Am Sports and Central American and Caribbean Games must have the sports that are on the program for the Olympic Games of 2028 in their next edition of their games. And so 2026, Dominican Republic is hosting the CAC Games. Cricket needs to be there. The next edition of the Pan American Games is in 2027. That will be held in Lima, Peru. Cricket will be there. So we are working with the International Cricket Council in order to facilitate ensuring that cricket is involved in those. Secondly, we are attempting to assist through Cricket West Indies, because as you know, in North America, for example, these games are the current World Cup is being hosted by Cricket West Indies and USA Cricket. But in the scheme of things, USA Cricket is sort of being nursemaided by Cricket West Indies. And so we are asking to allow Cricket West Indies to assist in nursemaiding the development of cricket and the sports program for the CAC Games in 2026, and similarly for the Pan American Games in 2027. And so it gives Cricket West Indies an opportunity to become itself more recognized in the global scheme of things in the development of cricket. Importantly, though, you know, for the Olympic Games, you have to go in under an Olympic committee. There are no West Indies team. So rather than seeing it as a disappointment, it opens up opportunity for each of our cricketing boards to get serious about the development of cricket, as we do in athletics, as we do in swimming, as we do in other sports, and make sure that their national teams are at a level that compete at the international level. We're seeing it being done in volleyball. The Eastern Caribbean Volleyball Association is working with NORCECA to make sure that there's always a place for a team from the Eastern Caribbean in the Pan Am Games, CAC Games, etc. We need to be doing that with cricket. So for the Olympics, just like with football, every nation has to try to qualify in its own right. For me, given the way the IPL has spawned the CPL, and we're seeing Vinci Premier League, we're seeing St. Lucia, we see everybody having some sort of independent league, we think that is the way that ultimately cricket is going to go and grow and give more opportunities to individuals from different nations in the region, an opportunity to get onto a higher level of the world stage and possibly representation at the Olympics.
Yes, Rudian, and certainly Mr. Joseph, we'll have to come back because I want to see how that will fit in with the Caribbean Games. Rudian?
Yeah, Mr. Joseph. Just as how football in the Olympics have an age I believe is under 23. Would cricket be the same, or is it an open age concept?
I think at the present time it may well be open. The thing is that when FIFA agreed to an age group, is because at the time the president of FIFA says we are not going to lose our right to holding the world's greatest football spectacle to the Olympics. Our World Cup must be the number one event. Will cricket take the same approach? I'm not sure, right? Because sometimes you need to get into the system before you start making demands. I don't know if they will do that. Similarly, I don't know if they will stay with T20 or if they will go with T10. I don't think myself that T10 gives enough of, of anything. But people are looking at the way basketball 3-on-3 has had the appeal,
Yeah.
and you get quick results, and you can have people pay for a ticket and watch multiple games. Netball has gone to fast 5. Beach volleyball has become particularly attractive because of the number of games you can play in a single day, and rugby sevens. So I suspect that cricket will also be called upon to look at how many games, how many teams, because the IOC is concerned about the number of athletes that they have as a total in the games, the overall cost to the host country, etc. So I am not sure on that. It may be because the thing too is the Youth Olympics is under 18.
Yeah.
And FIFA insisted on under 21, under 23, and allowed
Yeah.
you to 2 open professionals or 3 open professionals. So they may look at that kind of model. All of that I think is up for discussion.
And do CANOC have the to see multiple sports played in the Olympic Games that we don't have, like basketball and field hockey and those sport? Is that something that CANOC is looking into for the future, to see more athletes within the Caribbean is playing, or more countries is playing in those type of sports?
Yes, the thing is that we're dealing with history. There were some countries that as far back as we could remember, have had strong traditions in other sports. So Guyana was always strong in rugby. Trinidad was strong in rugby. Jamaica always had a rugby team. Barbados, because of its link with Britain, always had a strong rugby team. Some countries went into hockey. So you have Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and some of these others. They have been playing hockey. The issue is really for the smaller countries. All of these countries, as members of the International Olympic Committee, want to be represented at the Olympics. So as long as a new sport comes on the horizon and they believe that there's a greater chance of getting into that, into the Olympics as a result of that, you will find people moving toward the creation of other sports. Now, we may say, look, St. Kitts has 50-something thousand people. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, St. Lucia, around 110 to 170. How many sports can you play? So while we would like to encourage certain sports, the people in the country, the youths in the country, with everything being on television these days and streamed, will make their choices. So I am laughing because I remember that Lord Kitchener had a calypso on breakdance several years ago. I was decked off in a tight suit. I was doing breakdance.
Yeah.
I never thought in my lifetime that 10, 20, 30 years later, breakdance will be on an Olympic program, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for us who are into traditional sports, rock climbing, give me a break,
I know.
right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I've been asking recently, is there anything we could do in the Caribbean that we could try to sell to the world? As a
Certainly.
sport that might be sufficiently attractive now, bouncing back, because other people are doing all these things, and it seems as though we don't have anything from the Caribbean that we could contribute to the world and says, hey, why don't we try this as an international sport and see if it could work? I asked Barbados, where are you with road tennis, for example? Right? Will that be something that we could market further afield? So the choice, Rudy, is really that small countries are likely to be attracted to those games that are using fewer players, require less facilities, low cost. They will gravitate to that. But NOCs are not in the business of forming associations. So it's the people of the country, the youth of the country, who will determine what happened. Trinidad and Tobago got a bronze medal in the CAC Games last year in El Salvador in 3-on-3 basketball. Those are guys who were living under streetlights and playing
playing ball.
Exactly, right? So you understand that popularity resonated with something that they were always doing. And in the area where most of them come from, in Maloney, just outside of Piaco International Airport, they live for that. 3-on-3 is something they've been doing since they're growing up. So the choice is really going to be made by the next generation of youths and what choices they really want in terms of sport. And who knows, they may eventually develop a sport that could, in fact, get mass appeal. But in terms of us more or less pushing people in a particular direction, I think it's not really for Olympic committees to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk to you again, Mr. Joseph. It has to do with boxing and what is happening with the recognition of boxing with the IBA and the IOC, etc., and how that will affect the Caribbean and the sport of boxing in the Caribbean in the future.
Michael, you know I speak straight, right? I speak straight. Look, what the International Olympic Committee has done with boxing is unconscionable. And I say, even within the confines of world athletics, who is next? Who is next? Which international federation is next? The IOC has abrogated onto itself a responsibility to be the world police officer for sport. Is that where we are at? Because that is what it has done. It has determined the parameters within which it is going to accept the IBA, right? The IBA was responding positively to certain things, and then they said, wait, enough is enough. Who is responsible for this sport, right? And therefore, take whatever decision you want. There are countries around the world that have sided with IBA, and suddenly this organization emerges, World Boxing, that says, hey, we could do it. The challenge, who starts World Boxing? USA and UK, right? People say, that doesn't sound right. It looks as though there's a little bit funny that these two organizations think. And then who joins them? The traditional larger countries. Okay? So we end up now, I wrote an article recently about the Cold War, the sport being the next arena for the Cold War, right? So we're going right back to what happened in the years of the Cold War. So those who side with Russia, the IBA are seen as pro-Russia. Those who go against the IBA are seen as pro-West, right? That is what has happened. But we forgot that when the IOC wanted Sochi to be the home of the Winter Olympics, the president of the IOC and Vladimir Putin were inseparable, right? And now something has happened. So they're no longer the kind of bosom buddies that they were at a particular point in time. So national federations in the Caribbean are saying, but why should we be the pawns in this international conflict that is really a conflict between the IOC and IBA? So they are associated with people who were related to before. They saw nothing wrong. They were members. They voted in a particular way, and they felt that their vote said something, and therefore they were supportive of the IBA. But the problem for our small Caribbean countries is that we don't have the financial power to be able to say we can stand up to this or to that. National boxing associations are affiliated to national Olympic committees. National Olympic committees, by dint of their constitutions, are affiliated to the IOC. You have no choice. You cannot be an NOC and go against the IOC and its principles. So it's made a decision. They're not dealing with the IBA. What did the IBA do? They said, okay, we will give prize money to people who win the thing. What did they say? Anybody who accepts money from the IBA for an Olympic medal will be persona non grata kind of thing. So they're using the fact that they're operating as a sort of international sport police and therefore saying, get rid of the IBA. And it seems to me they're also saying at the same time, we are not ill disposed to accepting an international organization that meets our requirement. Essentially, you're saying you're heading in the direction of the of world boxing, right? At the end of the day, they will have their say because they control the Olympics. They will have their say because they control all continental multi-sport organizations that receive funding from Olympic Solidarity. So he who pays the piper calls the tune. And that is how the sport is tangled up in this international um, conundrum. But it need not necessarily be so, because the IOC has to begin by showing leadership and controlling itself. You cannot be an organization of self-appointed people who then take the responsibility to say, because we have a great mega sport, we can dictate the pace to everybody else. That must stop. That nonsense must stop. And you have to start by people within the Olympic movement saying to the IOC, you need change. You need to recognize that times change. Look at what has just happened with the NCAA and having now to pay students retroactively as far back as 10 years in some instances, right? What they know, IOC knows that many NOCs don't have the resources to engage in that kind of battle with them. But when are you going to stand up and recognize that you cannot operate a monolith with self-appointed individuals who continue to wield a big stick across what is the world's major sporting spectacle? What is happening now? Yes, initially some objected to what SEPCO says about athletics paying winners, and then next edition paying the top three. That is also going to change. People are going to demand that everybody who makes the finals gets paid, right? And that will run across all of the sports. The example of golf and what Liv did and how the PGA have had to turn tail, that is the nature of the game. These people are professionals. You have made them professionals. You've asked for them to be professionals. And now that they are in the sport as professionals, you're saying you want to be able to tell them the terms and conditions under which they will play, regardless of what sport they are. That is not going to continue to exist for long.
Mm-hmm. And as for the IOC and the IBA, it's sort of unfortunate, as you're saying, because the NOCs, especially in the Caribbean, they are the mercies of the IOC, and there's nothing, the hands are tied, nothing much they can do.
So while for example, Grenada, St. Lucia, they have announced publicly that they are still supportive of the IBA. But what can they tell their NOCs? The NOCs' hands are tied because they can't have their national organization represented at an IOC event if they are not in compliance with the rules of the IOC.
Yeah, wow. All right. So our second Caribbean Games coming up. Let's talk a bit about it, Mr. Joseph. The venue and some of the preparatory work that's taken place. I know when it comes to the Caribbean and these mega events, the logistics involved. I don't know how the Cricket West Indies is really doing that in getting the players. I assume they probably have charter planes, But let's talk about the preparation for the second Caribbean Games.
The preparation for the second edition of the Caribbean Games is up in the air. Why? Because initially, Curaçao says that they wanted to host the games. And Curaçao kept carrying us along the merry road, indicating that, yes, things were in place and they were getting there. When we asked for the specifics, we had major challenges in getting it from them. So we had to say, look, this is not making any sense. We approached the Dominican Republic because we said that they have to host 2026 CAC games. And therefore, because we are only using 7 sports or 7 to 9 sports maximum, that we can identify the sports and have them in the Dominican Republic in 2025 as test events for their hosting the CAC Games in 2026. That is a discussion that currently is on the table. But additionally, we are looking at an alternative and a new model, which is, can we have 3 or 4 Caribbean islands that are within close proximity to each other and split the 7 sports between them and says, look, can we have a Caribbean Games? We can have 2 running the same weekend and 2 the next weekend and have it at that model. We're looking at that. We ought to make a decision by the middle of July of this year because the games are scheduled for July of 2025. So that is where we are, honestly. The thing is that we are committed to having the games because we have started it. And we want the world to recognize that it is possible for us to do the games ourselves, to show that we have the capacity as a people to be resilient. One of the challenges that we have is that in spite of everything, we don't have a Caribbean commitment to sport at a governmental level. We have individual countries doing whatever they think is politically appropriate at any point in time with regard to sport. Okay? So we look at the way in which the Caribbean have rallied for the T20. We appreciate that. And we understand that. But cricket is not our most popular sport. And how does the rallying of Caribbean governments for the T20 cricket relate to our more popular sports? How does it relate to their contribution to the sports that have put us on the international arena and continue to do so? So those are questions that we want to ask CARICOM. We want to ask our heads of governments. While we understand and we appreciate all that you've done for cricket to 2007 and 2024, the fact of the matter is, we ought not to have a broader picture? Ought we not to recognize that sport has the capacity to bring us together, and that can happen in all sports? And therefore, why can't we see the Caribbean Games, which was originally scheduled for Trinidad and Tobago in 2009, right? And a mix-up thing and the use of a medical issue to cancel it within 1 week of the event being scheduled, and left everybody holding the bag financially. I mean, how can't we do better as a region? Because in any major sporting event, host nations are funded by governments, and the governments are expected to provide the facilities. And yet I have never heard a president of a country that is hosting the Olympics at the opening ceremony get to say anything other than, I hereby declare the games open. It's not a time for political speeches to boast about how much money you spend on the infrastructure, etc., because those people ain't got no votes in their country. It is an opportunity to say we have made this contribution for the development of our youths and the future of the youths of the world. Why can't we do that within this CARICOM area that we call home?
Which also brings the point, and I think you highlighting it, which Mr. Mike Sands, your friend, has been highlighting, the need for sports to be on the agenda of CARICOM, of Caribbean politicians. Okay, and I like how you brought it, you broke it down in terms of, how about not just cricket, and yes, we had a big conference on cricket in the Caribbean, etc., etc. But when you look at the individual islands of the Caribbean and what sports, whether it's at the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, World Championships, these sort of things, how much that's boosted the popularity of the country, the individual, etc. And I can use Grenada as an example. St. Lucia is another example, and these sort of things. I mean, when you talk about sports for Grenada, I don't think you could boast about cricket. You can boast about track and field, St. Lucia is another, and even Jamaica, for example, is one, that is probably a world leader in track and field, but how much are we putting into the experiences of these islands? And, and I think voices like yours and Mr. Sands and others, and even Mr. Lewis, Brian Lewis and others, hopefully will get our politicians, our regional politicians in particular, talking about sports collectively and how it can help. We talk, and importantly, Mr. Joseph, you may want to just spend a minute on that. The whole issue of crime, crime and violence in the Caribbean, and using sports as a vehicle to fight in that.
Michael, let me be honest with you. CARICOM, in many ways, has been an embarrassment for us in sport. It's no secret, when Gary Sobers, the legendary Gary Sobers, was coming to the end of his cricketing career, the Caribbean leaders, all of whom love cricket, wanted to give Gary a job. And so they created a CARICOM sports desk. The criteria for the person to head that desk was tailored so that only one person in the region could get the job. Okay? So Gary got the job. But they did not put Gary in a position where he could have facilitated the development of the job relative to what the region required at that time for the job. So that if you compare what was happening with Reds Pereira at the OECS sports desk at the same time that CARICOM had a sports desk, you realize it was chalk and cheese. Okay? Reds utilized the fact that he had no resources made available to him at the CARICOM, at the OECS sports desk either. But because he was a cricket commentator, wherever he went, he utilized his popularity to facilitate access to sponsorship for different events. And so for the time that he was at the OECS sports desk, we thought sport was alive in the OECS. We never had that equivalent in CARICOM. Gary left the job. They got somebody else to do the job for a brief period, and then they closed it off and they put sport under COSOC, right? So the Committee for Sport and Human Development within CARICOM. CARICOM has not moved beyond that until the then Prime Minister of Grenada, who himself was a cricketer, Keith Mitchell, talked about the development and the importance of a cricket committee. Now give me a break. All of history around us tells us that while West Indies was going back and forth in cricket, in a sport that did not yet have 100 members globally, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago and others were winning gold medals at the Olympics, which involved 200 plus countries. So what it is we didn't understand about the dynamics of numbers and the impact of those events and those victories on the Caribbean peoples across the world. Okay, I understand very clearly the role that CLR James and Larry Constantine others played in utilizing cricket and their time in England, Frank Worrell and others, to help bolster Caribbean countries in the movement for independence. That was the use of sport for political ends. And it worked. And there's nothing wrong with that. And what we're saying is that we can still use sport for political ends. Marishaw's 58 project on West Indies Federation ought not to have died because of selfishness among our Caribbean leaders. The Caribbean leaders never involved the peoples of the Caribbean in the decision-making process as to whether or not we should work together. But they want us to work together in sport. And we can do that. And we can build social solidarity through sport across the region. In spite of the fact that, yeah, we're going to make noise that they should not pick Junior Maria, they should not drop the Junior Maria, those kinds of things. We do that. But at the end of the day, once the team is out on the field, we support the team, right? And whether you're from Jamaica or not, or whatever you may feel about Jamaica, when Jamaica is competing in an event and no other Caribbean, we are all Jamaicans, right? So we watched Usain Bolt become the best sprinter in the world. So much so that brand Bolt was more important than brand Jamaica. Okay? He may have missed some opportunities since leaving the sport. But we never capitalized on that. We never capitalized on that. Jamaican women in the last two editions of the Olympic Games caused the world of athletics to focus more on women sprinters than on men sprinters. Since Bolt left the sport, people were more interested in the women 100-meter finals, 200-meter finals, and 400 than they were in the men's version, right? So we have been responsible for a significant amount of transformation of sport on the global scene. But our politicians somehow have buried themselves in cricket, right? And I'm saying we don't need a cricket committee for CARICOM. We need a sport committee, a sport commission that looks at our use of sport as a vehicle for sport tourism, bringing the economies of the countries into the global highlight. We ought to be able to do that, but we're not, because the tunnel vision of some of our leaders does not permit them to see that and to utilize sports people for doing things that are beneficial to the majority of the populace. There's nothing that brings people together more than sport. And we've toyed and talked about sport as a means of avoiding crime, but we've not put the resources to facilitate that. We've not created the infrastructure for it to create that. One of the things that we were able to do in Martinique is to talk about setting up memoranda of understanding, because Martinique and Guadeloupe, they have extensive resources in terms of sport research, in terms of sport scientific research, in terms of facilities for the hosting of camps that will allow you to do the entire scientific analysis of the athletes. Why aren't we working with them on that? Why aren't we working with them on that? You know, because we don't have the resources to do it ourselves. While they're still colonies, they're nonetheless getting the benefits of these advances from France. And they are utilizing it, and they're offering it to us as Caribbean people. So it was heartwarming at the moment in the torch. I said a few words about the importance of sport, the importance of the torch to Caribbean unity. And it's important that the president of the commission and the local government in Martinique were enthused about suggesting that there is every reason for them to be integrated into the OECS, for them to be integrated in the Caribbean situation, because they are Caribbean people. They didn't just come there by accident. They are Caribbean people, and they understand what Caribbean people. And I urge them, remember the words of your own Amy Césaire. Remember the words of Guadeloupe's Frantz Fanon. These were advocates for change for Caribbean people and Caribbean people's contribution to the world, not just to the region. We have had several Nobel laureates. What have we done with their work and their contributions? How have we used them, and how are we using them to propel successive generations of youth for the development of a region that emerges from what they did and what they contributed? We're not doing it. Sport. Look at you know what we could do with Kirani and Alain and what they have been able to do for the region? Your latest javelin thrower, Anderson Peters, right? Look at what he's done for the pride of Grenada. Look at what that young lady, Alfred, is doing for St. Lucia. Our girl, Tia Lafont in Dominica. I mean, they're giving small islands an international presence that they would not otherwise have had, however popular their prime ministers are. That's what they're doing. How are we utilizing that to bolster our countries and make the youths of our countries feel that they are part of something that is impacting the global environment?
I don't think when Mr. Joseph speaks, there's much you can say after that. But I can assure you, Mr. Joseph, that I will ensure that probably by Monday morning, every sport minister or someone related to sports will have that segment. No, it's important because I think it makes a lot of sense, and that's why there was no interruption there, because I think we have to start thinking, and you went outside of the box. Just a couple of words. We have 5 more minutes there, but I wanted to talk about your gala awards, because I mean, sports in the Caribbean is big, right? And they have been doing a lot. So that again might be a challenge for you as CANOC to have such an award ceremony to recognize the contribution of our sporting talents.
Well,
In the region.
I am glad I am not on the selection committee. I would want that responsibility. But I want to say, because you have Rudy in the studio there, and we tend to underplay the importance of people who are from our countries, and wherever they are in the world, they are willing to make a contribution because they know their roots and they want to be part of it. And we don't want to overload the award ceremony with just athletes. There are other people who contribute to the achievement of athletes, and very often they're not recognized. And I think it's a sad day, because we tend to put so much focus on the athletes who win. But you need coaches, you need physiotherapists, you need sports psychologists who help make the athletes do better. We also need administrators. And we tend to underplay the role of administrators in sport. We are where we are because we've had a good mix of administrators. That is not to say that we've not had bad administrators, but we need to recognize the whole gamut. And we also need to recognize those sporting organizations that have done well. So that is what we're trying to do, to find a way of at least giving them the opportunity to be recognized for what they have done. I don't believe that we should always be doing things posthumously. Give the people the benefit of knowing that while they are alive, that they were appreciated for what they have done. I think that's what we're trying to do, and we hope that this first edition will really open up opportunities for other institutions around the region to do likewise in their respective sports.
So what's the possible venue and time frame?
Well, everything is happening in this year. Our activities are going to be held in Providenciales, Turks and Caicos Islands, at the Sandals Beaches Resort. The lead team that's responsible for organization and administration of the events will be there from the 14th. But we have a number of things happening that whole week. So we have the International Olympic Committee with their sustainability program. They will be there. We will have the regional, the Commonwealth Games regional meetings for the Americas and the Caribbean. They will have separate meetings on separate days, and then they will come together and have joint meetings. We'll have the council, the Council for Sport and Human Rights. We'll have the International Sport for All organization. We'll have University of the West Indies, which is one of our major partners now, because we want an academic institution to be the repository of research and so on in sport. And we have invited some institutions. We've invited dance to explain to the membership exactly what their organization is about, and whether it is something that can appeal to the Caribbean. So we have, and of course we have Pan Am Sports, Central Caribbean Sports. So we begin officially on the 15th, and we end with our assembly on the 20th.
Which month?
At the evening of the 19th of October. On the evening of the 19th, we'll have the gala award ceremony. I'll send you the program so you'll have everything.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Just to wrap up, Rudian, on your side.
No, most definitely. Everything was said. And certainly...
A lot for you to decipher on the weekend, man.
Certainly, I know I'll be getting some phone calls about a lot of the segment and And so true. A lot of things that you spoke about, this discussion I literally had with someone a few days ago. But certainly, can CANOC have for 2020? I'm just asking, 2028 next Olympic Games have a Caribbean series of different sporting events where the athletes can have the opportunity to get some competition in prior to the Olympic deadline of the standard, which is required.
I think that's a good idea, Rudy. And if you send us the proposal, we'll be happy to look at it and explore the possibilities, because we have a 4-year lead. And so we are in a position to plan something like that, even if it would be in tandem with other institutions.
Okay, certainly, I will do that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right then. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Joseph, and thank you. Some final word from you before we wrap there.
I just want to say, we've known each other a long time, and you've been a soldier in the field, laboring for sport and sport development in this region. I think we also underestimate and undervalue the contribution that you have and continue to make. And I think it's important for others to join forces with you in terms of developing this program, sustaining it, and perhaps moving into the realm of doing podcasts that people may want to reflect on from time to time. But I congratulate you and I thank you for your continued soldiering in what is a critically important field, sport and Caribbean unity. So thank you very much.
And I want to thank you also, Mr. Joseph, and certainly pleasure having you. And I say, once we have Mr. Joseph, we can't be disappointed. And certainly, I will get my segments out, and we have a lot to chew on for the weekend. Thank you very much.
And they did say if you go to school, if you go to high school in a country, you're from that country. So definitely, I think PVC, certainly think PVC will lock you in and say you are a Grenadian. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you very much, Rudy. And so certainly, always a pleasure having Mr. Joseph. But as I said,
definitely.
I'm headed off to work. But as soon as I get the time, I start chipping away because I took
chipping away. Yeah. No, certainly.
Segments there. And I know I already said, as a matter of fact, while Mr. Joseph was speaking, I was sending a text to the press secretary, right, of one of the prime ministers. I said, hey, I told you about Mr. Joseph. So I had to send him that segment. Particularly with the CARICOM, and Grenada is hosting the CARICOM summit, right?
Summit, certainly.
Even if it's on the sidelines, but sports, it has to play a very important part.
It has to. And it's something that's been talked about. We've seen it in other countries. We are seeing it in other countries. Yes, those countries are bigger. However, we have seen it, and it does change. Yeah.
All right. So the point is being made. You're spending millions of dollars and not just Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Lucia, Grenada, Barbados even. They have the problem with crime and violence. So then, what are some of the solutions that you can incorporate into that? Hey, we have one already. We have sports, So why not incorporate? Why not incorporate sports into the discussion? That's all they're asking for, right?
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Yeah.
I mean, Michael, look at it right now. We have Copa going on, and then we have the Euro Cup, and I mean, not saying crime don't happen, but how many young athletes is running around doing foolishness? How many young people everybody's on a television station?
Well, you have Copa. You have all these football action. You have cricket as well, right?
And you have track and field. Yeah, right, so much going on right now. Yeah.
The attention span for especially the young generation is so much that they are attracted to sports.
They attract to sports.
And use sports as a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point they're making. If you can use sports as a vehicle, important. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ruben. Always a pleasure.
It was always a pleasure. We certainly will chat again. I may be at the Canadian Championship on Saturday. I'm actually we actually still waiting on an invite because that girl is from St. Vincent. It's our last opportunity to get as close to the standard as possible, and we're really waiting for that
What?
invite. And we have, because she's going to be competing international, we're waiting on that invite from them. And it has happened in the past, but we just I contact everybody I know at the highest up to Athletics
Yeah.
Canada.
Well,
So I'm just waiting and see.
even
Yeah.
Don Victor is participating in the U.S. trials. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So we just really definitely trying to get an opportunity to be closer to the standard. So that's how we're trying to, because like I said, in the triple jump, there's only 8 women in the world with the world standard, only 8. So we need to, as close we can get that invite.
yeah,
If we don't have the standard, so that's what we're doing. So next week is, if I'm in
yeah.
town, or
I
if I'm
know,
not,
I know.
we'll just
Yeah,
see.
I
Yeah, but we'll
understand
talk
that.
during the week. We'll talk
Yeah,
during the weekend. And even if I'm in Montreal, we can still have a discussion. She wouldn't jump until Sunday, so
mhm.
I can still be on. So certainly.
All right, then. No
All right,
problem.
you have a good one to work. And
Yeah.
the weather in the United States seems like it's overheated. So please
Well,
be
yes,
safe.
we had
Be hydrated.
we had the heat
Yeah,
wave, and
yeah.
but I'm walking around with let me see if I can get it. There's
You're like a
what do you
fan.
call it? A portable fan. Okay, I just have it here because I have to put it in my
Yeah,
bag.
yeah,
I just get
yeah,
my things ready. I have it in my bag.
yeah.
Voila. All right,
Yeah.
then.
So certainly.
Thanks
All
very
right,
much.
have a good one. And to
Okay, then.
everyone, thank you for
Yeah,
coming on.
all the best. Okay, then. So, folks, that's it for this weekend. Nice having you. It's a pleasure. Hopefully, we can chat during the week. Just some updates as usual. Follow the Facebook and Twitter pages, and we'll keep in touch. Yes, and as we indicated, next weekend is championship weekend. We'll let you know what it is that's taking place, but hopefully, we can get a program in. Until then, do have yourself a pleasant weekend.